evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this event this evening with Ian Rankin. Let me begin in the customary manner by acknowledging that we are meeting tonight on land which the Kulin nation was dispossessed, and that we acknowledge the injustice to the Kulin people and that was suffered by subsequent generations, and we look forward to an eventual treaty.
Oh.
And let me begin by asking the question on everyone's mind: should humans colonise space?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. The way things are going, I mean, we are the bugs, we are the disease, so possibly not. Although it'd be lovely, you know, there's a thing in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, do you know that? It's a bit with this there's this sort of spaceship that goes off into the cosmos and lands on a planet, and it's full of hairdressers and estate agents. And they've been convinced that they are the kind of convoy who are going to replicate Earth and stuff. And everybody's going, well, actually, you're the people everybody wanted to get rid of. So if we could colonize space with all the, politicians and the hairdressers and the estate agents, then might be getting
with
somewhere.
A rigorous immigration policy.
Rigorous immigration. That's what you. Well, you know this in Australia, right? You want a rigorous immigration policy, and anybody who's not allowed in is the people you want to come in.
Right. Okay, we've covered that topic then.
Yeah.
Very satisfactorily.
Come on.
You are here, of course, to talk about the latest Rebus novel.
Well done.
Number 21,
Good.
I believe.
Yep.
One of the 483 books, I believe, you've written at this stage, much to the chagrin of less robust writers. Rebus is now retired, has been for some time, but can't keep away from it. You've been living with him for now 30 years. What's it like to have part of your brain space, I suppose, occupied by someone else for that long?
I mean, you've done it with Murray to a certain extent. I mean, you've not done it for 30 years, but you've done it where one character inhabits you, and you really can't. I mean, there's something about them. They just get under your skin, and you think you think, I like you. I want to spend time with you. By spending time with you, I find out more about you as a character. And on top of that, you're a really interesting way of me looking at the world, And Rebus early on seemed to me to fit all these criteria. I thought he was a complex character who I wanted to know more about, so I had to keep writing about him to find out more about him. And at the same time, I thought, a detective is a pretty good way of looking at the world and asking the questions I want to ask about the world. And, as a kind of naive tyro writer, I was a student when I wrote the first book. There were only kind of two characters I could think of who could do that. One was a cop and one was a journalist who would have access to the highest in the land and the lowest in the land. So one character would allow you to investigate all these different layers. And so I was quite fortunate that the first Rebus book, he was a cop, because he didn't need to be a cop. I've got the original notes, and it said this guy's being tormented by someone sending him picture puzzles. He may be a cop. I mean, right back at the start of the first book, I thought he needn't be, but I decided he would be. And then thinking, all right, a cop's a really good person to use because he does have that access. What I didn't know, of course, was that cops have to retire. Journalists don't. If he'd been a journalist, I'd have been fine. He'd been tip-top. He was still working, But as a cop, I remember I was like, I forget which book it was, but I just finished writing a book, and I got a text from a cop I knew in Edinburgh. And he said, how old is Rebus? I went, I said, he's 58, 59. Why? He said, he's got to retire at 60. I said, the retirement age is 65, and no, not for cops. 55 for uniform, 60 for CID. So I'd invented the guy with inbuilt decrepitude.
You say he had to be a cop, though. Ultimately, now that's more than just about getting access, if you like, getting the information. It's also about what, a mindset, or it's also about the work continually coming your way. What is it that makes him, if you like, a more of a cop than anything else? I mean, at one point. In Rather Be the Devil, he says, I think it's to Siobhan, I'm not a civilian.
Although he is. I mean, he is. I mean, he's a retired cop, so he's a civilian, but it doesn't feel like a civilian. He's a born detective. You're right. He's a born detective. I think the thing is, for me, the figure of the cop, the detective, is very much like the figure of the novelist. We're picking away at a question, we're picking away at a problem, at a theme, we're trying to make sense of the world, we're trying to find a shape from something that seems quite chaotic, and you go, well, that's what detectives do. A detective is given a puzzle that they have to try and get some essential truth from. Now, they might not get a satisfactory conclusion to the story, they might not arrest anybody, but they might have been able to make sense of the world, or why this bad stuff keeps happening. Why does this happen? And crime fiction boils down to that. Why does bad stuff keep happening? Why do we keep doing bad things to each other as human beings? And Rebus allows me to ask these very big questions. And I've always had this very dark imagination. So when I was growing up in a little coal mining village in Fife, my first poem was called Euthanasia. The mercy killing of the elderly. And I put it in for a competition. I was 17. I put it in for a competition. It won second prize. And so it was published. When I got to university, my first short story was about a guy being made unemployed from a shipyard. I didn't know any shipyards, nobody who worked in a shipyard, My second story was about a guy who takes all his clothes off and goes for a walk down the street. That was my uncle, actually. But anyway, that was a true story. But it's quite, these weren't nice, touchy-feely stories. So the dark stuff was in my head, and eventually I found that crime fiction was a really good way of exploring all that.
So crime fiction's also, as well as a means of exploring the personality, if you like, of your protagonist, and possibly, as we have learned tonight, your own darker imaginings. But it's also a way of exploring the social and political environment in which, people operate.
And if I go to any country in the world, whether it's Australia, New Zealand, India, the States, Canada, wherever I happen to go, I'll always look for the crime fiction set there, because it will tell me quite a lot about that country, as your books did before I ever met you. So you'll find out about the politics of the country, the philosophy, the kind of life, the culture, the past, the present, good places to go, bad places to go. You'll find out an awful lot about a country from the crime fiction, because the crime fiction is about what's happening now and why it's happening and what it says about us. And I think that's a really powerful thing about crime fiction. It's not just about the whodunit. I mean, that's a part of it, but the whodunit is an essential part of it. But it's also about an exploration of who we are and why we are. And each writer who comes from a different tradition or a different culture will tell you something slightly different. So when you come to Australian crime fiction or New Zealand crime fiction, you'll get a sense of that country right now and what problems it's got.
And did you have a sense that would be a way of exploring your particular environment? Was that, did you want to, as it were, kind of, go poking around in Edinburgh to see, what the otherwise kind of hidden aspects of of Edinburgh were? Were
Not
you-
right at the start. I mean, the first Rebus novel was meant to be Jekyll and Hyde, brought to the present day, and brought back to Edinburgh, because Jekyll and Hyde, written by an Edinburgh novelist about good and evil, but set in London. I thought, why set in London? It's a really Edinburgh book. It feels like an Edinburgh book. So that was the first book. But quite early on, I thought, okay, Rebus allows me to explore all this quite dark stuff. And there's a lot of dark stuff in Scotland and in Edinburgh. And then you start to extrapolate and go, yeah, but the stuff you're finding here happens elsewhere. So I did a book called Flesh Market Close about asylum seekers and people trafficking. And then you come to Australia and you go, yeah, we've got the same problems. This is years ago. And you go, oh, really? I thought it was a Scottish thing. No, it's not a Scottish thing. It's a worldwide thing. So something you think of as being particular and local turns out to be universal. And I think that's a really important part of crime fiction as well, is that a lot of these things we're all trying to deal with, And so when I read a book set in India, because recently I read a book by Anita Nair about child trafficking in India, I go, oh, okay, so that happens there. I know it happens in other countries. It's happening everywhere, and especially with people trafficking and with asylum seekers. When kids get separated from their families, boom, you've got a ready-made market, and you've got someone who will exploit that, whichever part of the world they happen to be in. So it's a worldwide phenomenon, and you find a particular way of locating it and zeroing in on it, but it's going to mean something to people in different cultures.
But in your case, the tangibility of Edinburgh, its kind of physical presence is also sort of
it's a real city.
It's central, yeah. It's a real city, but it's also a kind of character in a way.
Yeah.
There was a time there where kind of no self-respecting city in the world didn't have a fictional detective.
Absolutely. As is still the case, probably.
As is still the
true.
case. So, yeah.
But again, because I didn't grow up there, the books are very much about Edinburgh. They're about Edinburgh as a microcosm for Scotland, but also me trying to explore the city and make sense of it, trying to understand this quite complex mechanism. Very small city, but quite a complex social and political mechanism. And Edinburgh keeps changing. So I write a book in 1987, the first Rebus novel. Edinburgh's got no parliament. There's none of this talk of independence. Suddenly you flash forward 30 years and you go, whoa, this is relevant and germane, and so you've got to take that on board. Rebus himself, I think, has changed over that time, physically, if not philosophically. So each book is a very different book. Although you say, well, it's a series, you go, yeah, it's a series, but when I start a new book, it's almost like a standalone novel because the city has changed and the characters have changed. They've got older, they're older and wiser, or more cynical or whatever. But Edinburgh is the main character, and Edinburgh is this very much, I've said it before, but I'll say it again, a Jekyll and Hyde city. Physically, every city's a Jekyll and Hyde. Melbourne is a Jekyll and Hyde city. There's a lot of stuff you see as a tourist or a visitor that you wouldn't see if you lived here. A lot of stuff you who live here get to know about that we visitors don't. Edinburgh's like that. People come and they go, oh, Greyfriars Bobby, click. Oh, a bagpiper, click. Oh, the castle, click. Haggis, Neeps and Tatties, pub, gone. And you go, hang on a minute. That's not Edinburgh. That's the surface. But underneath the surface is a lot of other stuff happening, some of it quite dark. And I arrived there as a student and going, this is quite a dark city. And then I started to read about it and thought, wow, its history is incredibly dark. Body snatchers, cannibalism, you name it, serial killers, it's got it all. But on the surface, it seems like a really rational city. So it is Jekyll and Hyde. On the surface, rational, underneath irrational. But it's there physically, the new town and the old town. The new town is rational and planned. That's the north side of the city. Once you get south of Princes Street, the old town is chaotic. So that's the rational and irrational. So I just thought this is a beautiful, crystalline place to set crime fiction.
It's almost sort of tailor-made.
Yeah.
While
you could do it here with Melbourne and St Kilda, right?
Well, yeah, but in Edinburgh, the first time I was in Edinburgh, I'm walking around going, oh shit, that's where Darnley and the gunpowder and Christ, that they were hanging people and flogging. People were flung off there, and as though kind of every stone had a kind of
And there's ghost stories and tours and all kinds of. I mean, it's just all this rich kind of tapestry, all of which tells us something about human nature, and a lot of what it tells us is that human nature doesn't change that much. I mean, all crime fiction forever and a day is predicated on this notion: why do we keep doing terrible things to each other? And that question never goes away. And what fiction does and what crime fiction does, we can't answer that question, but we can keep presenting the question in different ways and make you, the readers, think about it. Why? Why do you think this happens? Is it a natural thing about being a human being or a kind of capitalist society that certain kinds of crime will happen, or that we just keep doing bad things? Generation after generation, in different countries, in different cultures, this stuff keeps happening. And we see it all the time. And in fact, one of the earliest Scottish novels I ever read before I started being a crime writer was called Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner. Great title. And it's about a young guy in 17th century Scotland who's a religious zealot. He's a Protestant zealot. And he's told one day in church that he's a member of the elect. He's going to go to heaven. Oh, great. He leaves the church and immediately meets a charismatic, shape-changing stranger who tells him, now you're a member of the elect, you can do whatever the hell you want, including...
We have that here.
Yeah, really.
We have that here.
What's it called here?
The Exclusive Brethren. They met a shape-changing creature called John Howard who said, I will grant your wishes.
But it's become a trope of Scottish literature, this thing of the devil. Is it the devil? I don't know. It's either the devil who comes and tells this religious guy you can kill anybody you want and still go to heaven, or it's a figment of his imagination. He's actually a serial killer and he's a very disturbed individual. But at the root of it is this notion of going to heaven because you've killed lots of people who don't agree with your religion. You go, hello? Just a couple of days ago in Manchester, we got a manifestation of that exact thing. So this was a very early novel about a serial killer who was religiously motivated. And you go, this is an extraordinary thing that's still relevant today. So, a lot of Scottish crime fiction comes from that kind of Jekyll and Hyde, on the one hand, and this notion of people who are told they're going to go to heaven whether they kill people or not on the other. So there's a lot of that blending. And a lot of Scottish crime writers don't come from a tradition of Agatha Christie or Raymond Chandler. Might have read Agatha Christie, might have read Raymond Chandler, but a lot of us come from another place, which is to do with Jekyll and Hyde, Justified Sinner, Muriel Spark, and eventually William McIlvanney, who was a Scottish crime writer who was active in the late 70s, early 80s. But when you talk to Scottish crime writers, we've not gone through the normal channels that crime writers do of reading Agatha Christie or Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett. We've come from another place, which makes our books, I think, quite interesting and very varied. It's a very Catholic church. By which I mean a broad church. Good title for a TV series, by the way. Since you mentioned TV series, sorry. Third time round. Third time round for Rebus?
Third time round for Rebus
is
on the cards now.
Maybe. Oh my God. Yeah, we've had this conversation before about Rebus. When the first book was published in 1987, quite soon afterwards, I got a letter from my agent saying, we've got some TV interest. Ooh. It's Leslie Grantham who plays Dirty Den in EastEnders. He wants to take the story and transfer it to London, and he'll play a detective called Rebus in London, who will deal, and I went, great, brilliant.
Yeah.
Because they were offering 10 times as much money as I
they'll
got
do
from
it
the
as
book.
a musical on ice. Do you object? How
Absolutely
much?
Fine. Yeah. Disney, yeah, fine. Cartoons, no problem.
Yeah.
10 times as I think I got paid about £1,000 for the book. They were offering 10 grand. Great. Anyway, it all fell through because my agent went missing. It's a true story. It's a true story. My agent disappeared.
I hope you don't make a habit of that.
Yeah, really. No, my agent's in the room today, so probably, hopefully not. Then the BBC picked it up and they said, "Hey, we love it, and we would like Robbie Coltrane to play your ex-SAS."
Yeah, he's a natural for the more athletic aspects.
I said the flashbacks will be fantastic. Get over that wall, Corporal Coltrane. That all fell away, and then John Hanna's production company picked it up, and the television people said, "Yeah, we'll make it if you agree to play Rebus." So I don't think John Hanna was that happy about doing it. I think he would rather have done other things, but he did it. Then he left to go to Hollywood, and they brought in Ken Stott, and Ken Stott fans felt was a physically more beaten down looking guy who, was more Rebus-esque. But what I didn't like was they took it from 2 hours to 1 hour. So it was 1 hour per book, which was 45 minutes plus ads per book. And all they were doing was they were keeping the title of the book and chucking out the plot. And honestly, they were making up new plots that would fit that would be shoehorned into that space. And we lost nuance, we lost character development, we lost sense of place, we lost theme, we lost everything. So I said, no, you can't do it anymore. I'm going to get the rights back. And then just recently, our TV companies come up and said, "Hey, we're really interested. We want to do it long form, 3 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours. We want to do it properly." And they've approached a screenwriter who I really admire called Gregory Burke, who did Black Watch and various other things. He's a great playwright and screenwriter. And he said yes. So it's not a bad start, but it is the start of a process. And I've no idea which actor they're thinking of approaching. But hopefully this time it will be done properly. We're not filming this, no, so we can talk about this secretly. I was watching a French cop show. You might not get it over here, but you might, with my wife last year, called Spiral.
Yeah.
Engrenage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you get it. Okay. And I'm watching it. I'm saying to my wife, "What have I seen that guy in?" She said, "Which guy?" I said, "That guy there. Gilou, the kind of cop. What have I seen him in?" She went, "He's a French actor, same earth." I went, "Nah, I've seen him before." She went, "He looks like Rebus." I went, "Ah!" And I forget his name, but the actor who plays Gilou in Spiral, if I could kidnap him, bring him back to Edinburgh for an intensive language course, and tie him down to the bed, like in the Stephen King novel Misery, and get him to learn Scots. Yeah. Maybe bring in Sean Connery and just sit Sean Connery. After about 6 months, he could play a pretty good Rebus.
Yeah. I got to say, I always imagined Murray Whelan being when the French translation came out, when the books were published in France.
Not Depardieu.
The Master of Disguise, Gerard Depardieu. I loved the idea that people in the Victorian branch of the Labor Party were speaking French to each other. Qu'est-ce que c'est ce connerie? Copain. And so I had to put a face to it.
Go on. So, but did you have a face? Did you have a kind of character? Did you have an actor in mind?
I had a range of actors in mind until David Wenham came along. Yeah. When David Wenham played it, I couldn't have been happier because I had that problem. Would
that change the way you write about the character, though?
Well, you've said that
I don't watch it on TV. I've never watched
bullshit.
it on TV. No, I never,
really?
honestly, never watched it on TV.
Really?
I've been in 2 episodes, but I've never watched it on TV. I've got all the DVDs at home, and I always said if I ever stopped writing about Rebus, I might sit down and watch it. But I didn't want actors' voices, faces, and mannerisms interfering. Because I'd asked a lot of crime writers, I don't know if you did this before your stuff was on screen. I said, do I get involved or not get involved? And many of them, they said, it's up to you, but it will change the way you write about your character. And I went, whoa, I don't want that. Inspector Morse, Colin Dexter, he said he changed Morse in the books to be more like the actor who played Morse on screen.
Well, I didn't do that, but David Wenham gave me an idea, which I subsequently used. I mean, I was very pleased at the casting there because I had that problem with the first person narrator that people confused me with Murray Whelan, and I thought, well, perhaps they will confuse me with David Wenham. and by people, I mean women. And there was
single woman.
There were a few shots in. There were a few scenes in which he had a supermarket carry bag with him, and this was his idea. And Sam Neill said, you know, what's the story with that? And he said, well, I don't think Murray would be a briefcase kind of guy, but he would have to have papers. And I thought, I'd never thought about that before. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine him carrying a briefcase, but I can imagine him carrying files or something, you know, so supermarket carry bag.
I think I might be Murray Whelan then, because not here, but in the UK, whenever I turn up anywhere, I've always got, it's a carrier bag from a record shop. I come from a little village called Bow Hill in Fife. I call it my Bow Hill briefcase. The Bow Hill is just a carrier bag. Because in the UK now they charge you 5p for a carrier bag, so you've always got to have one on your person at any time if you're Scottish, because there's no way they're going to charge you 5p for a carrier bag. So I've got the little folded up record bag in my bag.
So did you carry one into the Vatican for your exorcism?
That's a good question, and I don't remember. I mean, this is teeing me up for a really good story. Which is why he's mentioning it. I did a series quite a few years ago, a TV series, which is hardly available. I don't think you can even see it online because it was filmed before the advent of YouTube and DVDs, called Ian Rankin's Evil Thoughts. It was originally called Ian Rankin's Evil, which was difficult when we went to every airport and you put down your kind of file case in Ian Rankin's Evil. Checking in, sir? Yes. What's your name, Ian Rankin? They see this Ian Rankin's Evil thing staring back at him. Ian Rankin's Evil Thoughts. And it was a 3-part TV show, which was absolutely fascinating, in which we looked at evil. So episode 1 was, what do we mean when we use the term? Does it mean the same thing to different cultures at different times? Episode 2 was, what do we do about it? Where does it come from? Where does it come from? Nature or nurture? And episode 3 was, what do we do about it? Locking people up, treating them, etc., etc. And as part of that, I went to the Vatican in Rome, and it was a misty Sunday night, and I was interviewing the chief exorcist of the Diocese of Rome, Father Gabriele Amort. Now, Google him. Google him. He died last year. He looks like Max von Sydow in The Exorcist. He's perfect. And we're sitting in a little chapel, misty outside, misty Sunday night in a chapel. The crew are kind of hidden behind hidden in the wings. And I'm sitting there with him and a translator, because he can only speak Italian. And we're chatting away. And I said, well, so, how long have you been in the business? Oh, 30, 40 years. How many extras have you done? Oh, 15,000. I'd love to be in your waiting room sometime. How many times you met the devil? 7 or 8. Okay. And he was quite rational. He said, most of these people need psychiatric help, and I'm happy to refer them to a psychiatrist or a psychoanalyst. Eventually I said, so what happens? And he's chundering away in bloody Italian, and he's bringing up this bag and the translator goes, it's easier if I show you. And the gear's coming out, and I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. And the director's head pops up from behind one of the kind of pews and goes, disappears again. And I'm going, and so the crucifix comes out, and the sash comes out, and the holy water comes out, and I'm going, whoa, guy. I said, look, if I kiss that crucifix, there are bars in Scotland I can no longer go into. And he exorcised me. It took about 35 seconds. He says he sometimes has to do it 17, 18, 19, 20 times. And it's quite a quick procedure. But I felt, honestly, Shane, I felt tip-top afterwards, man.
You did?
I said to the crew, it's just a normal Sunday night out for me, guys.
Yeah. No head revolving involved?
Once they got me off the ceiling and got the bile off my face, I was took me to a pub, put some grappa in me, I was absolutely tip-top, man, I'll tell you. But it was a fascinating, the whole series was a gift in a way, because I was getting access to psychiatrists who'd worked with serial killers, with people who'd caught serial killers. I was able to interview a guy on death row in Texas who'd been on death row for 12 years, and it was the kind of bulletproof glass and the telephone thing, like in a movie. All of that access. At the end of the procedure, which was months to film this, I could point to an act and say that was an act of evil. I found it still really hard to point to an individual and say that person is irredeemably evil. Now, there was one exception to that, and the reason I'm going to bring this up is because he died last week. Ian Brady, the Moors murderer, English serial killer from the 60s. Without me knowing about it, the director contacted Ian Brady's mum and said, "Can we talk to you about having a serial killer in the family?" And she passed that on to Ian Brady, and he got in touch with the director and said, no, Mr. Rankin talks to me. Doesn't talk to Mum, he talks to me. Now, luckily, I think, I had just read a book of his called The Gates of Janus, which is a horrible book that was privately published in the States. It was never allowed to be published in the UK, which is an apologia for serial killers, which basically says we are a higher group of beings who are hunter-gatherers, and you should revere us. And I thought,
if you don't, we'll kill you.
Yeah, really, honestly. And I said, no, there's no way. The director was quite excited. He went, oh, Ian Brady wants to talk to you. I went, there's no, excuse my language, there's no fucking way I'm going to let Ian Brady inside my head. Because once he's inside your head, he ain't coming out again. And so I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so that was, and it's an interesting point for me as a novelist. I mean, if you've felt this as well as a novelist, that was someplace I couldn't go. Now, as a novelist, that you shouldn't have that. There really shouldn't be places you don't go as a novelist. I remember one Rebus novel had a paedophile in it, but it was based on a real story. But the book originally was going to be the sections with the paedophile were going to be in the first person from his POV, his point of view. And I started and went, no, I don't want to go there. I've got 2 young kids. I don't want to go there. So I shied away from it. So as a novelist, there are places I've not gone that maybe I should have gone. As a writer, there are places I've not gone that maybe I should have gone. But that's because I want to live a kind of fairly balanced life.
Yeah, I think there are things that I've come across that that are very attractive as something to put in a book. You know, this is a kind of great story. Finding a way to make it funny has been the difficult part. But you know, you hear that. What?
Werewolves are out early tonight.
That's the next show.
Yeah, that's right. Full moon.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to, you know, you have this incredible access. You know, you find that, you know, because you're a writer, even if people have no idea who you are, you know, you say, I'm a writer, you know, I'm interested in that. Come in. Yeah. You know, and they'll tell you things and you'll see things that, you know, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I think that's true in some countries and some cultures. I mean, I think early on, American police departments got really fed up with people coming in who wanted to be writers talking about serial killers. Went, well, you know, you're in the wrong place, pal. I mean, I've been very lucky in Edinburgh because there aren't that many Edinburgh crime writers, so I do get access. And eventually, having got access, I also get invited along to retirement parties. And that's a lot of fun. And there was not this book, not a book before, but a book before that, Saints of the Shadow Bible, was about Rebus's mentoring when he was a young cop and what made him the cop he now is. So like the 1980s. And that was all taken from real conversations I had at retirement parties. And what would happen is you go to a retirement party and you'd be chatting away, you got your drink, you're going, yeah. That's a really interesting story. Yeah, just excuse me. And you'd go to the loo, type it into your phone.
Yeah.
Go back, and you go, whoa, you're halfway through a story. What was that one? You just got to go to the loo again. They're going, Ian got a prostate problem? You know, and I was just, and the stories were so extraordinary that I thought, I'd love to use them in a book. So a lot of the stories in that book were, and in fact, some of them I couldn't use because, as you know, some of the stories you get told that are true stories are not believable. And fiction has to be credible, which in this day and age is problematic. All right? Problematic.
Yeah, that's more than half the struggle.
I got told stories about Lockerbie and about the Dunblane massacre. I thought, I mean, these are amazing stories, but I can't use them.
Yeah.
people thought, oh, Lockerbie's a gift to a novelist. You go, I can't touch it.
Yeah. No,
Can't
I
touch
was
it.
told stories about people smugglers that were just, oof. You know.
Not yet. Maybe, writers loiter with intent. I mean, it's all lodged in there somewhere, and there might be a point in your future where they go, this is the time, this is right. But I've got stuff I've never used yet, might never use, but it's there potentially. The potential is there, and a lot of the Rebus novels are about the potential for terrible things to happen. There's a lot of stuff in the books that didn't happen in Edinburgh, might never happen in Edinburgh, possibly hasn't happened anywhere, but I think the potential for it to happen is there. And I remember when I wrote The Naming of the Dead, G8 Summit came to Scotland. Whoa, what a gift. Every cop I knew was going to be involved in G8. I thought, great, let's get Rebus involved in that.
Let's get him to push George Bush off his
bicycle.
bicycle.
Well, here's the thing. There was that true story that George Bush fell off his bicycle. George Bush arrived at this 5-star hotel, the Gleneagles Hotel in Scotland. It was his birthday. He goes everywhere with his bicycle. He cycles around the grounds. But it turns out that George W. Bush cannot cycle and wave at the same time. So he's cycling around the grounds, and the policeman waves at him, and he tries to wave back, falls off the bike, grazes his knuckles. I thought, oh shit, that's got to be Rebus. Rebus has to be the guy who waves. Great. So I construct a book, and it's all hunky-dory, and everything's fantastic. Then 7/7 happens. So down in London, there's bombs going off in bloody buses and underground trains. You go, I can't say that didn't happen, because it did. The whole week is constructed in a real week. So then I had to think, well, how do I manage to bring the 7/7 bombings into the story without making it completely gratuitous? And that was pretty tough. I would rather that hadn't happened. I would rather that Trump hadn't happened. All this stuff, Brexit, I would rather none of this stuff had happened, because it just makes the fiction writer's job a lot harder.
That's right. That's right. They've laid waste the field for fiction, really.
Honestly.
And
Trump is half Scottish,
the other
right?
thing I loved about that
was
the piss take of the Scottish cops, dealing with the Americans. And being able to kind of get their way around by going, murder squad.
Or just talking Scots so they can't understand a word you're saying. I mean, it's English, but not as we know it, Bones.
So what is this? What is the Scottish crime campus?
Oh my God! What happened a few years ago now was that they decided in their wisdom, the authorities, the government, whoever, that Scotland didn't need 8 regional crime areas. It needed one overreaching thing called Police Scotland. Now, as part of that process, they built a thing called the Scottish Crime Campus in the west of Scotland, where all the kind of bigwigs would hang out, all the kind of high-hegians, as we say, would hang out. And the other thing they did was they said, okay, we'll have a kind of crack squad. The major incident team will be based there, and whenever there's a kind of murder or a serious crime anywhere in Scotland, they'll be parachuted in. So one room will be locked in a police station to be only opened if they arrive. Now, this is problematic. If you're a fiction writer in Scotland who has a CID detective, because no longer do they investigate murders. Now, bless him, the new chief constable of Police Scotland knew this was problematic, so he invited all the Scottish crime writers to dinner one night. It's true, in Edinburgh, and we all got together and he said, I'm really sorry about this, but I have really fucked up your career, But every problem, every challenge is also an opportunity, you know this. And I thought, in a way, this is kind of great, because these people get parachuted into Edinburgh, and immediately the local cops don't like them. There's antagonism, there's drama, there's humour. There's all kinds of potential there for things to happen that couldn't have happened previously. So I've kind of used it so far to my advantage, that these people would be parachuted in. And when I got a tour of the police headquarters in this new Scottish crime campus, I looked around and thought, ooh, this is the kind of place where Malcolm Fox would be at ease. He's a suit, he's a yes man. This is where he'll end up. So in the latest book, he gets an advancement to there. which means that Siobhan Clarke back in Edinburgh is pissed off that he got the promotion, not her. So that changes their relationship. They can both feed to Rebus their angst and anxiety and anger about each other, and so it changes the whole relationship changes. And so all this is fantastic. And meantime, I've got this retired cop, Rebus, who's not been retired so long that he can't just wander into a police station.
Well, this is...
So he can get past the front desk for about another book, I reckon. You know, he can get past the front desk. Yeah. And of course, these guys who've been parachuted in go, how the hell did you get in? Yeah. And he goes, well, I don't know, I was a cop for 30 years here, I have no idea, you know. And he steals people's business cards. Well, because he's no longer got a badge, so he steals business cards and pretends to be a cop.
He's very cheeky all the way through this. He's got this hobby, for want of a better word. I mean, he doesn't know what to do with himself, so he's looking into cold cases, and in this particular case, he doesn't even have to look into a cold case because you know, the circumstances of an old case come up when he's out for dinner with his squeeze, and what's going on there, and
happy ending.
Well,
not in a sexual sense, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she is a coroner, and they do spend a certain amount of time talking about his lungs.
Yeah, I know. I love that, actually. I mean, that's all because of my wife. My wife, I mean, bless her, Miranda, who reads a lot of fiction, reads a lot of crime fiction. She's my first reader. And for years, you know, I'd give Rebus lovely ladies to play with, and she'd go, no, she's boring. I don't like her, he wouldn't like her, no. So they've never lasted very long. She does like the coroner. Well, she's not told me she doesn't, let's put it that way. But in this book, what she did say to me before I started writing it was, Rebus, in fact, she'd been saying it for about 3 books now. Rebus is in his 60s, he smokes, he drinks alcohol, he eats fried food, takes no exercise. Surely his luck has to run out. And so I said, okay, this book's your book. This is the one. So Miranda's got one of her best friends in Edinburgh is a doctor, a GP. So I said to the doctor, come around for tea. Came round, sat her down, I said, what would you expect Rebus to present if he walked into your surgery? And she came up with the most gruesome list of possible problems he could have. Yeah. And I went, whoa. Yeah. Well, and we came up with COPD, pulmonary disease, which is not nice, but it's manageable. It'll scare him, but it can be contained to a certain degree. So it's not like
Hank Marvin's.
It's not the Hank Marvin. It's not. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not a cancer, but it's enough that it'll make him go whoa. And the later books in the series, I think, have very much been about the aging process, about a guy who's starting to realize he's not superhuman. He's not going to live forever. That, you know, real life and mortality are tapping him on the shoulder, as they are Cafferty, the villain and nemesis, who's also his kind of Mr. Hyde.
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, Cafferty's his Carla, if you like, to his Smiley, you know.
Or his Moriarty.
His Moriarty, yeah. And Cafferty's not taking retirement too easily either.
I think it's. I mean, I've just loved that relationship between the two of them. This thing where you never know if they're going to be best friends or kill each other. And they're both men of a certain age, mid-60s, looking around at the world, going, "This doesn't make sense to me anymore. I don't even want to even try to understand Twitter." But also, do I make sense? Do I matter in the world? Can I make a difference to the world? Rebus and Cafferty are both thinking that. And at the previous book, the end of the last book, Even Dogs in the Wild, Cafferty walks away, holding up a finger to say he's got one last good fight left in him. And this is the last good fight. What had happened a couple of books ago was that a Rebus fan somewhere, I forget even where, came up and said, "Oh, I love Cafferty. He's a big, huggable bear of a guy." And I went, Ian, you've not done your job. You know, this guy is not a big, huggable bear of a guy.
At that point, you got out the hammer and nails.
Exactly. I mean, I thought maybe I was falling in love with him too much. You know, I was liking him too much. He was becoming too, you know, the kind of Hannibal Lecter. You know, Thomas Harris he falls in love with Hannibal Lecter, and Hannibal Lecter becomes a much less scary individual as the books go on. I thought, oh shit, Ian, you've got to get back your Cafferty. So in this book, we do find out that he is quite a violent, psychotic individual.
This is the most violent
He's a very
for
violent
while,
guy,
isn't it? You know.
but also he does like a bargain. I mean, he's a proper Scot. He does like a bargain.
yeah,
We find out in his book
Two
why
for the
he
price
can't
of one,
turn
yeah.
down the offer of buying 2 hammers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. You should go shopping with my wife. We don't need it, but it was half price, so I got 2 of them.
Almost like me, I go out and my wife says, "Can you get a courgette and some avocados?" and come out with 3 LPs. Oops.
But as he's, as he's aging, and so is Cafferty, there's a sense it's almost as though they have more in common with each other than they have with much of the world. And when the London Review of Books had those great personal ads, these terrific ads, they don't have them anymore. But I read one a few years ago, and it said, "Woman 83 looks 80." Would like to meet similar age gentlemen to discuss health issues, And I almost feel like, that Rebus and Cafferty are going to kind of somehow sort of, meet at the X-ray machine.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, people say to me, "Can you, do you see where this series is going?" I go, "No, I never see more than one book ahead." But there might come a point where you go, "Well, the only possible place we can go now is the care home." Where Rebus and Cafferty in electric wheelchairs are trying to find out the case of the missing soft-boiled egg.
Yeah, yeah. But Cafferty's running something out of the pharmacy.
See? Come on. Get it written.
We've got a few minutes left, so at this point I will open the floor to questions. I'm sure there will be many of them.
Oh, we've got somebody.
Yeah,
well done, sir.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay. Ian, great talk. How much of you is in Rebus? And if there's quite a bit, how much of your sense of humour is in Rebus?
Oh, thanks very much. There's not a huge amount of me in Rebus, I don't think, but it's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, where do these characters come from? They obviously come from your subconscious, if not your conscious. I mean, he's a different generation from me. He left school at 15, joined the army. I didn't have any of that. I mean, when he was married and had a kid, I didn't have any kids. I wasn't married when I started the series. I think he's a darker, more Old Testament kind of guy than I am. I think I'm much more like Siobhan and Fox. I think if you put Siobhan and Malcolm Fox in a blender, you'd get something more like me. I mean, I've never been brave. I've never got into fights. I mean, Rebus was a very physical guy in his early days. He's my Mr. Hyde. He's my way of kind of, he will do all this stuff for me that I'm too scared to do, I think. Sense of humour, yeah. I mean, as soon as I started meeting cops, which I did quite early on because the Oxford bar where I drank as a student was full of cops who used to drink daytimes in Scotland. They don't do it anymore, it seems to me. But, the dark, very black sense of humour, I thought, oh, wow, that's my sense of humour. And, I mean, you need to have that sense of humour to deal with some of the crap that cops are dealing with, as with pathologists and lawyers and social workers and everybody else. So, the sense of humour. Thing is, it can take me weeks to get the great one-liner for Rebus. But when he does it in the page, you go, wow, amazing. Just straight off the top of his head, he came up with that great one-liner. But in my own life, I'm at the pub and I go, yeah, okay. But 3 days later, I go, what I should have said was this. And I think of the great one-liner 3 days later. So I am less able than him to come up with a kind of really smart one-liner. But I think in crime fiction, you need some humour. There has to be some humour to leaven the darkness.
He's more sort of sarcastic. You're kind of, personality-wise, more kind of commedia dell'arte.
Well, I'm not college educated. I have no idea what that means.
Is
that Italian?
Says the PhD.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
PhD student, never completed.
You said that there were places that you didn't want to go in your head, that you didn't want to deal with certain matters. Real police officers and people who deal with criminal law have to go to awful places and deal with awful things, and they take them home. How true is Rebus's character if you never take him to those places in those books?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I think Rebus has been to those places, and it has affected his ability to be a parent, a spouse, and even to have a kind of social grouping that he can let off steam with. I mean, again, when I was, quite young and I was hanging out with cops, there was a lot of busted marriages, there was a lot of heavy drinking, there was a lot of hanging out with the cops. You hang out with the cops after work because they were your family. You could talk to them, you could let off steam with them. You couldn't go home and sit around the dinner table and say, I had 3 rapes, a suicide, and a murder today. You could only talk to other cops about it because they would understand that you needed maybe humour to deal with it, or you needed something to deal with it, if only booze. And so that kept pushing you away from normal society. You became much more kind of insular. And I think there's a lot of that in Rebus, that he has bottled a lot of this stuff up, and it's not been good for his relationships, not been good for his marriage, not been good for him as a parent. And I think that was realistic. I think that's changed. I mean, I think the attitudes in the UK have changed. There's a lot more, you can open up, you can express your feelings. You can be a modern man, Shane, in a way that wasn't true.
I really meant
with plots. Well, with the plots, I mean, I think there's nothing apart from the fact of things like taking the paedophile case into the first person, which I didn't do. I mean, Rebus still dealt with it. He still went into it. People smuggling, he's dealt with. Satanists, he's dealt with. Serial killers, he's dealt with. Financial shenanigans. No, I don't think I put the brakes. I mean, I can't think of an example apart from that one where it was to do with it was to do with me getting inside somebody's head. But Rebus deals with it absolutely. He deals with it. He's a kind of testing, a sounding board for all this kind of stuff. And he's not me. I mean, he's not me. And when I'm sitting writing the books, it's not me. It's weird. But I can jump into his head right from the get-go and think, how does he, I couldn't deal with this, but he can deal with it. He can deal with it. But at a cost to his psyche and his sense of well-being.
I just wanted to ask you about the role of music in the books, and whether the taste of Rebus sort of reflects your own taste, or whether you research it, because you talked about going out to buy 3 LPs when you're supposed to be buying vegetables earlier. Yeah,
I do. I've got a little record buyer's guide to Australia in my pocket. I do buy a lot of records. Rebus's musical taste is almost mine, but not quite, because he's a slightly different generation from me, so I've always got to make sure it's his musical taste, not mine. But as a frustrated rock star, which all crime writers are, right? As a frustrated rock star, it's lovely to put lots of music in the books, because, well, for all kinds of reasons. One, I'm a frustrated rock star. Number 2, I think it delineates character quite well. Yeah. So you can learn a lot about Rebus's
execrable musical taste.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked you would go there this early on in our friendship. No, you can tell a lot about him by the kind of music he listens to. And musicians have become fans of the books, which has been a lovely spin-off from that.
Well, this is in fact the title.
Yeah, well, the title of this one is a song by John Martin, who I never did meet. I once got a chance to meet him and I didn't do it. In fact, my agent's in the audience tonight. We were having lunch in London years ago, and I was going to do Desert Island Discs, which is a radio show on BBC Radio 4, where you choose your 8 Desert Island records. And the one record I couldn't live without was Solidaire by John Martin. We were having lunch, walked outside the restaurant. John Martin was sitting at a table outside with some friends, pissed, with about 6 bottles of wine in front of them. And I thought, oh, this is my chance to go up and say hello. And I bottled it. I couldn't do it. So you should always try and meet your heroes, because he was dead the next year and I never got a chance to say hello to him. But the thing is, because musicians have become fans of the books, I've got to work musicians, I've got to meet musicians, I get to hang out with people like Van Morrison and Nick Cave. I mean, come on. Why wouldn't you do that, It's as close to being a rock star as I can get without putting in the heavy hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a slightly jejune question, but do you read other crime fiction writers, and if so, present company accepted?
Hey.
Who do you like?
Do I read other crime writers, and if so, present company accepted? Who do I read? Well, actually, I mean, a real thrill for me this afternoon was I got to meet Adrian McKinty for the first time. I've been reading Adrian McKinty's books for years. He lives in Australia. I've never had a chance to meet him. And so we hung out for an hour and a half with a couple of beers, and lovely guy, really great guy. I think his books are fantastic, they're exceptional. And they do what I want crime fiction to do, which is look at a culture, look at a society, look at the politics, look at everything that's going on, and use crime fiction as a way of doing that. And my wife grew up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, so it really has a resonance for me when I read them. I read a lot. I mean, Denise Mina, the Scottish writer, her latest book's phenomenal, The Long Drop. I read a lot of crime fiction, and I just finished on the way over here, by which I mean the flight over from the UK, I read The Force by Don Winslow, which is this huge, sprawling, big, meaty, beaty, big and bouncy novel about cops in New York. So I read a lot of crime fiction. And I do read Shane's books, he knows that. He knows that. I've interviewed him. I've interviewed before, right? I've interviewed you, or have you just interviewed me? I forget. We've done conversations before. We once did a comedy club in Melbourne. Do you remember the comedy club in Melbourne we did years ago?
Did we do maybe 10 minutes of stand-up, did we?
I don't know what we did. I think we were both wearing very loud shirts. I also remember the first time I met Shane, going for a drink with him, I think again in Melbourne, at a time when you had a little line along the front of the bar, and you weren't allowed to smoke between that and the bar, but you could smoke behind that line, but the drink had to be that side of the bar. I've never seen a guy do calisthenics the way this man did calisthenics between the bar. It was a workout while drinking and smoking. I've never seen the like of it.
Yes, well, I don't even get that sort of exercise anymore.
I just would like to ask, since your first novel in 1987, obviously characters grow, the world around us all changes, and you must have accumulated an enormous amount of knowledge as you've written all these books. Does the writing process get easier for you? Is it easier for you now to think, oh, I'll write another Rebus, or is the process as hard as perhaps it was in the first one? I mean, it mightn't have been hard. I don't know.
No, I think it gets harder. I mean, it's really frustrating. I was under the impression it would get easier. You know, if you're a mechanic and you take apart a car engine, once you've done it 100 times, you can do it blindfold, I would have thought. Maybe not. But with novels, it just gets harder and harder, and it really pisses me off. I thought by now it'd be really easy. I could just say, hey, pop, 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 pop. But, I mean, maybe it's just me. I mean, maybe it's just psychology. But, the fear that your new book isn't going to be as good as the book before, absolutely terrifying. That blank page, once I start this, there's no going back, you know? So I defer the evil moment. Then you're looking at all these great young writers around you who are writing amazing things. You go, oh my God, how can I write anything that's as good as that? So there's all of that. All of that is going on. And you don't want to repeat yourself, but your publisher might want the book to be not too different from the previous book, and your readers might not want it to be too different. You know, and you go, what's Rebus doing now? He's aged. What can I do with him that I couldn't do before? All of that stuff is bouncing around your head before you start the book, and it's absolutely terrifying. And if I didn't have a contract, I probably wouldn't do it. Honestly. I think the contract is the extraordinary thing. When I'm given 6 months before deadline, okay, then I sit down, I focus and go, I've got to write something. I've got to push past that fear of the blank page. And the way I do it is to write very quickly. The first draft is written incredibly quickly, 30, 40 days for 300 pages. And it's shit. You know, it really is it's really rough. It is rough. You know, you could shave a badger with it. But the plot, by then I kind of know the plot works. And once I know the plot works, I can fix it. I can refine it and refine it and refine it and give the characters some kind of 3D stuff and make sure that the language flows and is mellifluous and everything else. Once I know that basic plot works. But then the terror comes back, next book. And every year you've got that terror. Why do we do it, Sean? I don't know. Why do we do it, Shane? I have no idea. Why do we do it?
Well, I don't know. I don't do it anymore.
Come on.
For similar reasons. Did you see that story about the guy who wanted to climb Mount Everest at 89 or something? I don't know how he feels. Don't do it, mate. You know. And he died. But yeah, I think
that's a depressing thought for me. It's such a depressing thought for me that we'll get no more of your novels. Come on.
It's that what you were saying about the contract. I mean, there is someone at that point you have given your word to.
Yeah.
That's the kind of.
But there's an unspoken contract with the readers.
Well,
don't you think?
Well, yeah. There's that, but ultimately there are going to be, maybe, 2 or 3 people that you say I will do this, and you know, if there's any kind of skerrick of, I don't know, Protestant worth ethic, Catholic guilt or whatever, you go, okay, I've said I'll do it, I'll do it. You know? And then you think, well, I don't know, this is what I think. I think, well, you know, you don't want to let the readers down. You don't want to disappoint the readers. So it has to be at least as good as your previous book.
It's got, I mean, you can't go. I mean, no writer goes out into the world thinking, I'm going to write a book that's worse than my previous book.
Yeah.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
Nobody does.
That's right.
But I mean, but the more books you write, the harder it gets.
Mm.
You know, it does get harder the more books you write. And I mean, I do feel it. I mean, when I started the first book, I was full of vim and vigor and spunk. And I could, fine. I got 8 great ideas a day. 8 great ideas a day. I was just full of ideas. And now I get 1 a year if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
You know, I've not got as much spunk as I used to have.
You have to inoculate yourself against good ideas too, because you do that. You go fast and furious and you write your outline, you know, and you've got it all worked out. You know,
Inoculate yourself against good ideas,
than getting 4 chapters in and having a better idea than you had the first time round. Because then,
that's true.
you know,
That's true.
Starts again. There's a red light flashing here in front of us that it says 00000. And either that is an early warning that the North Koreans have launched, or some kind of a message.
Or New Zealand.
Or a message that we must conclude the events at this stage. So please get them out and bang them together for Ian Rankin.
Shane Maloney!
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.